You ever come outside on a Monday morning, coffee in hand, only to find your car missing from your own damn driveway, and a sticky neon orange towing notice fluttering like a middle finger on your front door? Yeah, that was my Monday. And the woman responsible for this early week felony in fashion and logic was none other than Karen Albright, the self-declared queen of our HOA. Her crime? Calling a tow truck on my legally parked car because, according to her, the vehicle violated neighborhood aesthetic continuity. Whatever that means. For context, my car is a spotless, navy blue Tesla. Hers is a peeling, champagne-colored minivan with a bumper held together by duct tape and dreams. But in her world, I was the problem. She stood on her porch with arms crossed and a smug tilt to her jaw, wearing a bathrobe with a floral print aggressive enough to cause migraines. She gave me a thumbs up. I gave her a silent promise. She was going to regret that gesture so deeply she'd consider learning Morse code just to take it back. I didn't yell. Didn't call the tow company in a rage. Didn't even post a furious rant on Nextdoor like most of our neighbors do when Karen striked. No. I went inside, topped off my coffee, and opened a spreadsheet. You see, what Karen didn't know, and what no one in the HOA really knew, was that my job as a property acquisition analyst came with one very lucrative side hustle. I buy real estate. Foreclosures, auctions, bankruptcies, you name it. I don't flip homes. I flip leverage. And Karen, in her infinite arrogance, had no idea that her little power trip had just triggered the wrong man's revenge reflex. Step 1 was information. I started by pulling property records. It took 2 clicks to discover Karen didn't own her house outright. She leased it from a real estate trust based in Scottsdale. Public info. And guess who had a contact at that trust from a past project? Me. A few emails later, I learned they were open to offers. Apparently, Karen had been a less than stellar tenant. Late payments, noise complaints, one incident involving a raccoon and an illegal bonfire on her front lawn. They didn't want her out bad enough to evict her, but they were thrilled at the idea of a clean buyout. I asked for the numbers. The trust countered. We settled. And just like that, 48 hours after Karen had my car dragged off like it was some rusted-out civic eyesore, I held the deed to her home. That's when I started planning what I call Phase 2, enlightenment. But I wasn't in a rush. Revenge, when done properly, simmers like a gourmet reduction. You want the full flavor of karma to soak in. Over the next week, I watched her go about her days with the confidence of someone utterly oblivious to their own looming downfall. She yelled at the Jenkins kids for riding scooters. She fined old Mr. Lefkowitz for leaving his trash bins out 5 minutes past pickup. She even posted a poll in the HOA Facebook group about requiring every mailbox to be HOA approved in size, color, and emotional tone. Yes, emotional tone. I screen capped it, just for the file I was building. Then came the inspection letter. I drafted it using official-sounding language, cited Karen's own favorite HOA clauses, and mailed it on letterhead from the trust's management wing, which I now controlled. The letter pointed out a list of violations: untrimmed hedges, non-compliant garden gnomes, and a decorative flamingo that had a crack in its wing. I gave her 30 days to correct the violations, or face possible lease termination under Clause 9b. She stormed onto my lawn the next day. Yes, onto my lawn. Screaming. Demanding to know why the trust was harassing a model resident like her. I met her with the same calm smile I use on rookie interns trying to argue Excel formulas with me. I said I couldn't comment on ongoing leaseholder evaluations, but I was sure the trust was just following policy. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. You could see her brain rebooting, trying to form a retort while also pretending she knew what leaseholder evaluation meant. I asked if she needed a ride anywhere, since, of course, she'd towed my car without so much as a knock. Her eyes narrowed. She muttered something about legal retaliation and stomped off. The thing is, I didn't stop there. I started poking around the HOA's inner workings. Turns out, Karen had bullied her way into becoming president when the original one moved out. The HOA board was stacked with her friends, mostly wine moms and a guy named Carl who owns 12 parrots and no discernible spine. But I found cracks. One board member, Denise, secretly hated Karen ever since she rejected her solar panel proposal. Another, Rajiv, confided he only stayed on the board to stop Karen from banning outdoor string light. I scheduled some coffee chat, shared some documentation, whispered a few carefully phrased observations about ethics, misuse of power, and community vote. Within 2 weeks, there was a special board meeting scheduled. Agenda: leadership restructuring and emergency financial oversight. That was the same night I slid a second notice under Karen's door. This one more formal. Her violations hadn't been corrected. Her flamingo still had a broken wing. And due to her failure to comply, her lease would not be renewed at the end of the term, 60 days from now. Her name wasn't on the deed. She couldn't protest the decision. She could try to sue the trust, sure. But the trust, technically, didn't exist anymore. I dissolved it and re-registered the property under a new LLC, KLH Holdings. My initials. Karen tried to play it cool. She posted a passive-aggressive manifesto in the Facebook group about vindictive personalities and deep state infiltration of the HOA. She quoted Sun Tzu and said she had allies in high places. The next day, a woman from the local news showed up asking about a neighborhood scandal. I gave her a tour of the lawn flamingo and a copy of the lease violation report. Karen refused to speak to the camera but was caught in the background trying to wrangle her minivan's sagging trunk closed. The HOA vote came 2 days later. Karen lost the presidency in a 5-2 landslide. Her 2 loyalists resigned immediately afterward. I was nominated as interim president. I declined, but I recommended Denise, and she got it unanimously. Her first act? Eliminating Karen's fines on other neighbors. Her second? Declaring a Flamingo Forgiveness Week. The Jenkins kids now scooter freely. Mr. Lefkowitz leaves his bins out until Wednesday. I even got my old parking spot back. As for Karen, she's still living in the house. For now. But I've already had a contractor measure it for future renovations. The LLC has plans. Big ones. Maybe a rental. Maybe a boutique bed and breakfast. Maybe I'll let her reapply as a tenant just for sport. With a pet deposit. And a broken flamingo clause. If I had to pick the exact moment Karen realized the walls were closing in, it was probably when the lease termination notice, final envelope arrived. Unlike the polite, almost surgical precision of the previous warnings, this one came with a timestamp, a highlighted deadline, and a helpful QR code linking to a moving company's website. I had it hand-delivered by a property manager I hired specifically for this interaction. His name was Tony, a soft-spoken ex-Marine with a clipboard, mirrored sunglasses, and the aura of someone who could dismantle a lawn chair with his mind. Karen opened the door in her usual morning uniform, giant house slippers, an oversized t-shirt that read Queen Bee, and a scowl that could sour milk. She snatched the letter, skimmed it, then slammed the door so hard a nearby bird feeder trembled. I watched it all from my porch with a cup of espresso and the tranquility of a man who'd won the long game 3 moves ago. My phone buzzed with a notification. Denise had just pushed a new HOA policy through. No fines could be issued without majority board approval. Karen's last remaining weapon, the thing she used to keep the neighborhood trembling, was now locked in a glass case labeled out of order. But Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. No, Karen's strategy was to spin. She couldn't accept defeat because that would mean acknowledging she wasn't as powerful as she believed. That afternoon, the HOA Facebook page lit up with her latest rant. She claimed the lease termination was part of a hostile corporate takeover, that outside forces were trying to gentrify the community, and that she would be fighting for justice all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. She added 15 American flag emojis, and a quote misattributed to Abraham Lincoln. Carl commented, "Praying for you," and one of her wine mom allies posted a crying face emoji. Everyone else stayed silent or quietly liked a photo I uploaded of my newly reparked Tesla with the caption, "Guess who's back?" I gave her 2 weeks before she tried something desperate. She lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning, I stepped outside to find a "For Sale by Owner" sign staked in her front lawn, crooked, tilted, and hand-lettered in what looked like Sharpie. It was the real estate equivalent of a flare gun fired during a shipwreck. Except this ship hadn't even sunk yet. I knew she didn't own the place. She couldn't sell it. She could barely legally sublet it. I had Tony call her and ask what exactly she was planning. Her answer? A protest sale. It's symbolic. The next day, I had the sign removed by our maintenance crew. And that's when she escalated. It started small. Trash mysteriously showed up in my yard. Bags of it, slit open to let raccoons feast. Then came the dead landscaping. Someone poured something into my hydrangea bed that killed the plants in hours. I checked my doorbell camera, and sure enough, there she was at 2 a.m., wearing black sweatpants and a ski mask, sloshing something out of a gallon jug. It would have been hilarious if it hadn't cost me $600 in replacement plants. I didn't retaliate. I documented. Karen's final spiral was surprisingly cinematic. She hosted an emergency neighborhood forum on her lawn, complete with lawn chairs, a karaoke microphone hooked up to an old amp, and a folding table stacked with Costco cupcake. About 7 people showed up, and 5 of them were just there for the snack. Karen launched into a monologue that veered between conspiracy theories, lukewarm personal insults directed at me, some smug Tesla-driving trust fund baby, and dramatic pauses meant for applause that never came. She declared her intention to run for HOA president again at the next official election. She promised to restore dignity to this crumbling community. When Denise walked by with her dog and waved, Karen yelled, "Traitor!" loud enough to make the dog flinch. The next day, she received a formal cease and desist from KLH Holdings for trespassing, vandalism, and attempted property interference. The envelope included a still image from the security footage of her dumping poison on my plant. Karen didn't even try to deny it this time. She called the local paper instead. The reporter who showed up was young, cheerful, and clearly delighted to have something mildly scandalous to cover. I met her at the curb and handed over a folder labeled Chronological Documentation of Harassment and Lease Violations, subject, Karen Albright. I had color-coded tabs and everything. She asked if I had a quote. I said, "I think it's unfortunate when community members try to weaponize bureaucracy instead of fostering harmony. But I trust the process. It tends to favor logic over tantrums." She smiled. Karen, meanwhile, refused to come out of her house and instead taped handwritten signs to her windows with slogans like, "I'm not going anywhere," and "Freedom isn't leased." The article that followed was devastating. Headline: Suburban Power Struggle Ends in Eviction Battle. It painted Karen as unstable, irrational, and in violation of multiple community guidelines. It painted me as calm, precise, and quietly effective, which, I have to say, is better than any Tinder bio I've ever written. The photo accompanying the piece was of me and Tony standing outside the property holding a clipboard and coffee respectively, with Karen's house in the blurry background and her angry signs clearly visible. The final 60-day notice deadline loomed. With 3 weeks to go, she made one last play. I came home one afternoon to find a moving van, yes, a real one, pulling into her driveway. Hope sparked in my chest. Was she finally leaving? Nope. It wasn't moving her out, it was moving others in. Karen had decided, apparently, that if she couldn't stay, she'd create enough chaos to poison the place on her way out. She had advertised rooms for rent on Craigslist and taken deposits from 4 different tenants. All of them arrived on the same day, all of them confused, and all of them holding subleases signed in crayon on copy paper. I stepped in fast, called the sheriff's department, called my lawyer, called the property manager. Within 24 hours, the fake leases were voided, and the would-be tenants were refunded. One of them even thanked me for rescuing him from what felt like a cult house. Karen screamed at the deputies, accused me of financial warfare, and cried while throwing a cupcake at Tony. It missed. Her breaking point came a few days later. I had started mild renovation prep, inspections, roofing estimates, that kind of thing. The contractor knocked on her door to assess interior measurements. Karen refused to open it, claimed squatters' rights. I calmly reminded her, through the door, that she was still under an active lease but had zero legal ownership. She called me a fascist and said she had contacted the FBI. I said, "That's great. I've already contacted HGTV." The next morning, she was gone. Just like that. Vanished overnight. The lawn was a mess. Flamingo still broken. But no sign of Karen. I found out a week later that she'd moved in with her sister across town, pending legal recourse she claimed to be pursuing. She hasn't filed anything. Probably never will. Because she knows, deep down, she didn't just lose a war. She picked a fight with someone who understands the rules better than she ever did, and rewrites them when necessary. You'd think after all the screaming, lawsuits, zoning complaints, flamingo graffiti, and rogue flyers, things would have finally gone quiet. For a while they did. The neighborhood breathed like someone had opened a window after years of suffocating under scented candles and mandatory lawn edging. The Facebook group turned from a digital war zone into a place for lost dog notices and sarcastic memes about trash pickup. Denise started hosting monthly game nights, Carl installed a butterfly garden behind the pool, and I almost forgot what it felt like to walk outside without scanning for flying cupcakes or stalker sedans. Almost. Then, the postcards started arriving. Not bills. Not legal mail. Postcards. Each one handwritten, each one with a photo of some vacation destination, Niagara Falls, Mount Rushmore, the Grand Canyon. And each one, unmistakably, from Karen. The handwriting was hers, a loopy, aggressive script like every letter was trying to bite the paper. The messages were short but pointed. Hope you're enjoying your little kingdom. I'm seeing the real world. Power fades. Character doesn't. Some people build communities. Others build prisons. Each was signed with AK in red ink, and none had a return address. At first, I thought it was a weird attempt at guilt tripping. But then they kept coming. One a week. Sometimes two. Each more passive-aggressive than the last. My favorite? A photo of a lighthouse with the message, "Even lost ships eventually find their way. Enjoy your flood." I kept them all in a shoebox. Labeled it Karen's Greatest Hits. Then, just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. 3 weeks passed. No cards. No sightings. Nothing. I figured maybe she'd finally gotten it out of her system. Maybe the real world had offered her something better than an HOA grudge. Or maybe she'd run out of stamps. Then I got the call. Tony, my property manager, phoned me in the middle of a Tuesday meeting with a single sentence. "You need to see the backyard." That's never a sentence you want to hear, especially when you know the history of your tenants includes the human equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane with a superiority complex. I drove over immediately, half expecting to find a flamingo graveyard or maybe a cryptic message carved into the lawn with a weed whacker. But what I found was worse. A group of men in suits surveying the property with measuring tape and clipboards. My tenants were on the porch looking baffled. One of the men introduced himself as a representative from Solaria Properties, a private development firm that had, according to him, purchased the plot directly behind the house and were preparing to install an access road. The problem? Their plans required partial easement through the backyard of my property, specifically, right through the hydrangea garden, over the koi pond and down to where the fence met the tree line. And they had paperwork, signed by a former trustee of the original real estate trust that once owned Karen's house. The easement had apparently been quietly filed years ago during a period of HOA landscaping expansion, and it had never been revoked when I bought the property. Karen had known. She had filed it. The signature matched. She'd created an access route on the back of the house's parcel, presumably for some minor landscaping maintenance. But it had never been used, until now. And now, a private development firm was planning to build 6 microhomes directly behind Flamingo House 2.0, using my garden as their driveway. I didn't panic. I seethed. Marcia and I went through the documents like forensic analysts dissecting a Cold War treaty. The easement was legally sound, barely. The clause had a provision for temporary rerouting, but it would require negotiation. Solaria was unwilling to budge. They claimed they'd purchased the rights with full disclosure and weren't interested in delays. My only option was to buy the easement back. Their asking price? $75,000. Not for land. For permission to deny them use of mine. I asked Marcia if this was legal. She said, barely. But yes. And it stinks of Karen. The tenants, understandably, were horrified. They didn't want construction noise. They didn't want their garden bulldozed. And I didn't want Karen's bureaucratic ghost grinning from the grave. So I made a decision. I paid it. But I didn't just hand over the check. I did what I do best. I researched Solaria. Dug deep. Turns out they weren't just small-scale developers. They specialized in flipping parcels for quick profit, using obscure filings to cut corners. I found 3 cases of them abandoning projects after breaking ground, leaving half-built houses and confused neighbors in their wake. I knew what they were doing. They were going to sell the land to a modular home supplier and disappear with the money. I wasn't just buying back my easement, I was cutting off their shortcut. So I paid the $75,000, rescinded the easement with a notarized letter, then filed a preemptive zoning request with the county to block any new development on the adjacent land until a full environmental review could be done. It passed. Solaria backed off. And 3 days later, I got another postcard. This one was blank. No message. No signature. Just a picture of a snake coiled on a garden path. Subtle. Creepy. Definitely Karen. I locked down everything after that. I had Tony do another full review of every document Karen had ever touched during her HOA reign. We found 6 more little Easter eggs, buried in the paperwork. One that would have allowed her to collect mailbox fines personally, another that reclassified parts of the sidewalk as neighborhood assets under her discretion. All of them technically inactive but still legally present, like ticking time bombs. We cleared them out, filed corrections, locked the HOA charter behind so many legal gates it might as well be Fort Knox. Then I did something even bigger. I bought the lot behind Flamingo House. It had gone back on the market after Solaria backed out. I swooped in, paid cash, and turned it into a dog park. Called it Freedom Fields. Opened it with a ribbon-cutting ceremony and free ice cream for all residents. Carl cried. Denise gave a speech. The flamingo got a tiny leash and a welcome plaque. The community rallied. HOA satisfaction went through the roof. Karen, if she was watching, had to witness her final attempt to undermine me turned into a neighborhood love fest. My revenge wasn't just about retaliation anymore. It was about prevention, fortification, community, and it worked. Until last week. I got another postcard. A picture of a small white building with a hanging sign that read, Municipal Court, Small Claims. On the back 2 words. Next round. No return address. No name. Just the fire of a woman who refused to lose, even when all the pieces were off the board. I smiled, tossed it into the shoebox with the others, and poured myself a drink. Karen thought she was playing chess, but I already bought the board. I was sipping cold brew on my porch when the process server arrived. Young guy, maybe 22, nervous like he was delivering plutonium. He handed me a cream envelope stamped, small claim summons, and muttered, "She says hi," before sprinting back to his car like I might bite. I opened the envelope slowly, expecting absurdity, and I wasn't disappointed. Karen was suing me for property defamation. Let me say that again. Not slander. Not harassment. Not even emotional distress. She had invented a term. Her claim stated that I had sabotaged the long-term financial value and public perception of her former rental home through malicious redevelopment, mockery via decor, and this was real, emotional vandalism. She demanded $15,000 for reputational damage and unauthorized use of architectural elements for satire, which, if I had to guess, referred to the flamingo statue now wearing Ray-Bans and a tiny seasonal scarf. Even the clerk at the courthouse must have choked back a laugh when stamping this. Marcia, naturally, was delighted. "We've officially entered performance art," she said, flipping through the complaint like it was a trashy novella. "Let's give her the standing ovation she wants." I agreed. We filed a motion to dismiss, complete with a counterclaim for legal harassment and an itemized list of every petty expense I'd incurred due to Karen's antics: flamingo repairs, plant replacement, zoning paperwork, and yes, a $400 therapist bill. Karen wanted theater? We'd give her Broadway. The judge didn't even bother scheduling a full hearing. He threw the case out after the first review, citing frivolity bordering on delusion. He added a note. "This court advises the plaintiff to reconsider her understanding of property law." But Karen wasn't done. She filed an appeal. Then a second suit, this time in a neighboring county, using a different spelling of her name, Karen. That one didn't even make it past intake. What amazed me wasn't her persistence. It was her creativity. She'd gone from dictator to saboteur to postmodern performance artist, all in the name of reclaiming something she never really had: control. But this time, I didn't engage. I let the lawyers handle it, let the paperwork flow, and kept my focus on the neighborhood. Because that's where the real win was happening. Denise's leadership had transformed the HOA. We now had a rotating community newsletter, monthly potlucks, and an actual suggestion box that wasn't just for Karen's passive-aggressive complaints about mailbox colors. The Flamingo house tenants started an annual Survivor of the HOA barbecue. Carl's Butterfly Garden attracted a grant from the local Nature Conservancy. The Jenkins kids built a lemonade stand with HOA approval and made over $300 in a single weekend. We'd created the one thing Karen feared most: a thriving community without her. Then came the final twist. I got a call from the bank holding the old mortgage on Karen's rental. Turns out, after she moved in with her sister, she'd tried to buy a new place, just a few blocks over. But because of her public behavior, the article, the lawsuits, and a rather infamous neighborhood meltdown caught on someone's Ring camera, her application had been flagged for risk. She needed a co-signer. And guess whose name she listed as a reference? Me. I couldn't believe it either. The mortgage agent said it was probably a clerical mistake, but the form had been filled out by hand. In my handwriting. Forged, obviously. Marcia filed a fraud report within the hour. We didn't press charges, but it was enough to tank her application and get her blacklisted by that particular lender. Her sister must have had enough, too, because I heard through Carl, who hears everything, that Karen had moved out and was now bouncing between Airbnbs under an alias. And still, the postcards kept coming. They slowed, sure. Went from weekly to monthly, then to just holidays. Halloween brought a card with a cartoon of a witch riding a flamingo. Christmas featured a reindeer with the message, "You win, for now." On my birthday, I received one that simply said, "Do you think you're the hero?" No signature. Just a scribbled smiley face with devil horns. I kept every single one. Not because I admired her. Not even out of spite. But because every card reminded me that when someone wages war on you with pettiness, the most effective retaliation isn't escalation. It's evolution. Karen never evolved. She just changed tactics. But we changed the rules. We made it so her tactics didn't work anymore. The flamingo she once fined neighbors for now stood proudly in a community garden. The HOA, once her playground of power, had turned into an actual support system. Her old house, which she once used to intimidate and surveil, had become a symbol of neighborhood joy, complete with rainbow lights in the hedges and solar-powered gnome fountains. The more she tried to claw back relevance, the more irrelevant she became. Then, one day, the cards stopped altogether. No lawsuit. No sightings. No cryptic messages. Karen had vanished. Not in a dramatic puff of smoke or an embarrassing arrest. Just gone. Like a particularly bad storm finally drifting out to sea. We didn't throw a party. Didn't mark the day. We just moved forward. And so did I. I bought another property on the block. Then a third. Not to flip them, just to protect them. I started quietly helping residents refinance, guiding them through paperwork, cutting through red tape the way Karen used to wrap it around people's throat. I didn't want to be the new HOA tyrant. I just wanted to make sure no one else like her ever took root again. And then, about 6 months after the last card, something strange happened. A letter arrived. No return address. No stamp. Just tucked into my front gate. It wasn't a postcard. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even written in all caps. It was a simple, handwritten note. I'm tired. You were right. I lost more than the house. I lost myself. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say it. That's all. Signed, Karen. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it and placed it in the shoebox with the others. Not because I believed she'd changed, but because it meant the war was truly over. A few weeks later, Denise nominated me for a Neighborhood Service Award. I declined. Told her I was more of a behind-the-scenes guy. But I did attend the ceremony, clapped loudly, and even wore a pink flamingo pin on my lapel. The Jenkins kids brought lemonade. Carl brought butterflies. Someone played acoustic guitar. And in the background, that ridiculous statue, once a symbol of everything wrong, stood proud in the sun, shades on, scarf fluttering in the wind. Karen tried to tow my car. So I bought her house, rewrote her rules, and helped rebuild the community she tried to break. That's not revenge. That's architecture. And in this neighborhood? 3 weeks after Karen vanished into the suburban mist like a ghost in yoga pants, I got a voicemail. It was from an unknown number, and the voice, half whispered, half manic, was unmistakably hers. You think this is over. It's not. People like you don't win. I have connections. I have options. She paused, then added, enjoy the calm before the storm. Click. No name, no number left, just that. I played it twice, then forwarded it to my lawyer, followed by a 3-word text. Here we go. I didn't panic. I prepared. Karen was the kind of person who interpreted silence as weakness and escalation as validation. So I gave her nothing. No response, no acknowledgement, not even a passive-aggressive HOA memo. That's what made her dangerous now. She was untethered, unranked, and worst of all, ignored. And ignored Karens don't simmer. They boil. Sure enough, the storm she warned me about arrived in the form of a legal letter. Thin, dramatic, printed in a serif font that screamed desperation. The letter accused me of harassment, targeted eviction, emotional distress, and unconstitutional housing aggression, a phrase that doesn't exist in any legal dictionary. It was signed by a paralegal advocate from a law office whose Google reviews included one from a guy claiming they represented his cat in a custody battle. I checked, real review. 1 star. My lawyer, a grizzled contract assassin named Marcia, laughed so hard she spilled her tea. This is less of a lawsuit and more of a cry for help. But we'll treat it seriously, on the record. We drafted a response that was equal parts stern and surgical, pointing out that all actions taken had been legally documented, properly filed, and in line with both the lease agreement and HOA regulations, most of which Karen herself had authored. We included the video of her poisoning my garden, the fake subleases, and her Facebook rants threatening to burn this HOA to the ground. It was a tight, airless file that left no wiggle room. We sent it via certified mail. Karen refused to sign for it. Twice. Then things got weird. It started with strange sightings. Neighbors swearing they saw Karen loitering in the park behind our development, wearing sunglasses and a hoodie like she was part of a low-budget spy movie. Someone claimed she was driving a rental car and filming the neighborhood. Another spotted her placing flyers in mailboxes at 3 a.m. I got a copy of one. It read, "Your landlord is a predator," in all caps, with a grainy photo of me at the grocery store holding a watermelon. I framed it. That weekend, I hosted a block party. Not out of spite, okay, maybe slightly out of spite, but mostly to recenter the neighborhood. Food trucks, a bouncy house for the kids, lawn games, live music. Everyone came. Even Carl danced. At one point, I stood at the grill flipping burgers, and Denise leaned in and said, "You know, for a guy who claims to hate drama, you sure attract it like a lightning rod." I smiled. I don't attract it. I just don't duck when it comes. A few days later, a white sedan parked across from my house and didn't move for hours. I walked by casually. The windows were tinted, but I saw her. Karen. Slouched low, sunglasses on, chewing what looked like a Twizzler with the menace of a Bond villain. She didn't roll down the window. Just stared. I waved. She peeled out and didn't return for a week. Then came the letter to the county zoning board. Karen, in a final act of red tape vengeance, filed a formal complaint accusing me of illegal short-term rentals, unlicensed renovations, and unauthorized vehicle exhibitions. That last one referred, I'm pretty sure, to the time I parked my Tesla on the corner during the block party with a bow on it as a raffle prize. Yes, I raffled off a weekend with my car. Yes, it was a hit. No, it wasn't illegal. I met with the zoning rep. A polite guy named Stuart with a clipboard and the permanent expression of someone who's seen too many basements. He did a full walkthrough, reviewed my files, drank half my Nespresso pod supply, and finally said, "I'm not supposed to say this, but this woman clearly has a personal vendetta. You're clean. Her filing's going to backfire." And it did. The complaint triggered a retroactive audit of Karen's previous HOA activity. Apparently, the zoning board cross-references HOA-led fines with legal zoning records, and when they looked into Karen's tenure, the inconsistencies started glowing like a radioactive jellyfish. Dozens of fines had been issued with no official vote. Modifications to the bylaws hadn't been logged properly. The pool fund, which should have had a budget surplus, was mysteriously missing $3,200. When asked about it, Karen's explanation boiled down to emergency landscaping. Denise took the findings and called an emergency town hall. It wasn't optional. The whole neighborhood showed up. Karen did too. She stood at the back in a trench coat like she was trying to smuggle herself in unnoticed. When Denise presented the audit findings, Karen burst out laughing, maniacally, like a cartoon hyena. She shouted that it was all fabricated, that I had infiltrated the board, and that she was the victim of housing assassination. When someone asked her to define that, she screamed, "Look it up!" and threw a half-full water bottle at the podium. The police were called. Again. They didn't arrest her, but they did issue a warning. Trespass again, and there would be consequences. By now, her former house had been repainted, landscaped, and renamed on Google Maps by the new tenants as Flamingo House 2.0. The old flamingo statue had been restored and now wore sunglasses. It had its own Instagram account. Even Karen's former friends had started distancing themselves. Carl blocked her. Denise muted her. The wine moms stopped inviting her to trivia night. She was unraveling in real time, and I should have felt vindicated. I didn't. Because here's the truth. I didn't want to destroy Karen. I just wanted her to stop. To stop policing mailbox fonts. To stop toying with people's homes like she was the gatekeeper to some imaginary kingdom. But she couldn't. Her identity was built on control, and when that was taken away, she had nothing left but theater. That week, her sister called me. I didn't even know she had a sister, but the voicemail was apologetic, almost embarrassed. She explained Karen was going through something, job loss, divorce rumors, maybe even early signs of something more serious. She asked if we could, somehow, call it off. Start fresh. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked through the neighborhood one evening and really looked at it. The kids on scooters. The smell of someone grilling. Solar panels on rooftop. A dad playing catch in the cul-de-sac. All the things Karen used to fine us for had come back. And it was better. Lighter. Human. The next morning, I sent a reply. I said I wouldn't pursue any more legal action. I wouldn't respond to her provocations. But I also wouldn't let her back in. Sometimes peace means closing the gate gently, but locking it just the same. Her sister replied with a simple thank you. Karen hasn't shown up since. Sometimes, in the silence of dusk, I think I catch a glimpse of that white sedan, parked just out of sight. Maybe it's her. Maybe it's not. But either way, the neighborhood keeps moving. Flourishing. Free. And me? I started working on a book. Working title: HOA Hell and the Flamingo Rebellion. Because if you're going to survive a suburban war, you might as well write the damn history.